The age of steam has finally gone. All that remains now is the memory, the metal carcasses, and a long wait for the breaker's torch. The steam engine is one of the most potent symbols of an era of both ruthless prosperity and bitter struggle, of a time when each machine had an individuality that a man could respect, come to terms with in a way that no longer exists. In 1923, Sir Nigel Gresley's new A3 class Pacific locomotive Flying Scotsman was a part of this tradition. 5 years later, on the 1st of May 1928, it pulled out of King's Cross Station on the first non-stop run from London to Edinburgh. In 1934, it was the first steam locomotive to reach 100 miles an hour. And by then, the name Flying Scotsman had acquired a special glamour it has never really lost. After 2 million miles of service, Flying Scotsman made its last run for British Railways in 1963. It was bought the same year by businessman Alan Pegler. He restored it to its former LNER glory and has run it ever since on steam excursions for railway clubs and societies.
My enthusiasm for railways doesn't...
Pegler's railway enthusiasm has become a way of life. His dream of repeating the non-stop run exactly 40 years later, on the 1st of May 1968, is now a reality. To do it has cost him both time and money.
I was lucky enough to have a family business to go into, or I thought I was lucky enough to at the time. And of course, having spent most of my younger life being prepared to run this business, which I did, eventually became chairman and managing director, the business befell the fate that befalls so many others and got taken over. But the only good thing about that was that it just so happened that the takeover occurred about a year after I'd bought the Flying Scotsman locomotive. So I had the decision to take whether to decide to go on working for somebody else or another company, or to opt out and do something entirely new. And I decided to opt out and do something entirely new, which meant that I'd got the time to devote to running all these curious activities which are terribly time-consuming. One could not possibly, I think, do the sort of things that I've been doing in the last year or two unless one was able to do that and nothing else.
Of course, when one buys a piece of machinery like the Flying Scotsman and intends running it, especially non-stop to Scotland, one has to have somewhere to keep and maintain it. At the time, one had to look around with an eye to the future, and one found that Doncaster was one of the few locomotive depots left that could cope with this kind of work. It was near the family business, and of course the Flying Scotsman itself was built here, so back here she came. One simply pays the rent and all the bills, and British Railways do the rest.
They want a lot more maintenance, you know, fire dropping, lighting up, calling, washing out, fitting, etc. You know, I think...
I'm lucky enough to have the services of a number of retired railwaymen who keep her looking the way she should look. And I'm pretty certain the reason they do this is not because of the present-day glamour attached to the Flying Scotsman, but the fact that they're able to recapture a way of life that they possibly grumbled about as young men, but which nevertheless became a part of living that they felt they had lost forever.
You came to work, you had a snap tin, you were packed up. You didn't know how long that snap was going to last you. I mean, you might be away as long as 16 hours on occasions. Many a time come home to a dried-up dinner or a wife in a bad temper. I've seen my children at home, they said, "Hello, Dad, are you going to work?" "No, I'm not." "Oh, you'll be going to bed then." And that's the kind of thing you used to get. It was either all work and no pleasure, or all work or all bed. That's how it used to be. There's none of that nowadays, I don't suppose.
It's rather a strange feeling, though, after, well, I was working it out, it's about 3.5 years, really, that this exercise first was mooted. And now that it's finally come to the morning, it's rather like, I suppose, a diver on the high board waiting to take the plunge, and I really can't wait now to get on the footplate and get on with it. How much do you think we've got on there now? By the look of it?
9 ton 15.
9.5, 9
That will be well away.
Yeah.
Should be ample all the way through.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good. Well, we'll just do the remaining topping up before we move off.
She's burnt all that coal coming up light. She's burnt a lot, hasn't she? She's burnt a bit,
Right.
Extra coal up here, it's rather difficult to get the thing to open. In the old days, of course, when there were plenty of steam locomotives running everywhere, there was no problem. The water was treated in advance. Now, you never know what sort of water you're going to get. So we treat our own in this way. These briquettes we fill in here, and gradually during the journey, these get dissolved into the water, and it ensures that you get nice, clean water in the boiler, and it makes the boiler last a great deal longer. At least that's the theory, anyway. Good morning. Bob, do us a favour. Step up over. Right.
We've got to stop in.
Half a minute, I'm going to test it. Half a minute.
The object, as far as I was concerned, was to be allowed to have a go. And it is an extraordinary thought, in my opinion anyway, that on a great nationalized undertaking, one can take out a private piece of machinery, 45 years old, and hitch it onto a train of British Railways stock and take 300 people 400 miles on a weekday in the middle of all the other services. Let's face it, I mean, this is a pretty sporting gesture on the part of the British Railways Board, in my opinion, anyway.
I'm not able to go on the run today, but I just wanted to come and see my dear old engine again to say how do and wish her good luck.
Right away.
I met my wife for the very first time on this Flying Scotsman train on the 1st of May 1928. And therefore, this journey is giving me the most tremendous thrill. But my wife didn't even know it was a non-stop, and certainly not the first non-stop run. And she was ensconced in another carriage, but an elderly, a more elderly lady who was supposed to be keeping an eye on her had booked her a seat in our compartment. Much to her disgust, she took her away from a very pleasant, youthful surroundings and brought her into our carriage, where she was horrified to find we'd got a parson.
And I was really rather cross about this, and I said in French to Mademoiselle Lecoeur, it's very sad to bring me in here when I was having such a lovely time on the other end, you know, and making me sit next to a parson and making me behave myself for the rest of the journey. And he just turned around and answered in perfect French. I was really completely shattered about this. However, he was extremely nice, and he gave us a wedding present, I remember, so he wasn't too cross with me in the end.
There were only the four of us there, and everybody was fearfully matey and excited about this, and we were being greeted on the way by waving crowds with flags and banners, and all the town bands were turning out. Everybody on the train got most tremendously friendly. A terrific excitement, a sense of occasion. And so naturally, when the time came for lunch, I suggested to my new friend, Molly Payne as she was then, what about coming to have a spot of lunch with me? And she was very young in those days and very shy, as indeed she still is, and would not accept my invitation to go and have lunch with her in the dining car. However, the parson made it all right, and he said, well, perhaps you may allow me to invite you both, and then that will be all very seemly and proper. In those days, one bothered about such things. And we went to lunch, and during the rest of the journey, we got on like a house on fire, and we were engaged within 3 weeks' time. And so I was let in for 40 years hard labor.
Well, I think that it was 40 years hard for me, not for you, anyway.
Why on earth is a long journey behind a steam locomotive so nice for some people, for me certainly, and to other people it's perfectly horrible?
It's the smell, familiar smell of smoke and the beat of the engine and the feeling that you're being pulled not by a mechanical box on wheels, but by something pulsing and alive.
It's an aesthetic experience. It's a good railway journey by a steam train. Good journey by an electric train is a nice experience. And any journey by train, so long as you can't smell diesel exhaust too much, but a good journey by steam, it's a realized work of art.
I feel that this train in particular, 40 years after it first ran, is very important. Same engine, agreed to lighter load, but vitally important still. The railway services in this country have been cut back more and more, and to be able to show that a good old steam train can still do it, I think will make us very proud. Everybody on this train very proud.
We got 49, 11 and 3, 14 with 14 miles.
Well, I spent 47 years on the railways.
Yes.
And it's a big change from my days to what it is today. And that's what I've come for today, because I think I'm approaching 80. And I think it'll be last time I shall see a steam engine.
Interest with steam trains is especially model steam trains, because it opens up a very wide field there, because you can now buy models of steam trains with the real smoke and even synchronisation with the wheels.
Well, that's one of the typical sort of dodgy things that you can't legislate for. Apparently a broken rail being replaced, and nothing you can do about it. We go literally down to walking pace, but quite literally the wheels did just keep turning, so we can still honestly say we haven't stopped. But it's a damn sight too near for comfort.
background. And quite naturally, the interest transferred itself to my son. And when he was ill with measles at the age of 3, it was most natural for me to tell him stories about trains. And he said, "Daddy, what was the engine? What are the engine's names?"
That's the way.
And I invented names on the spur of the moment: Edward, Gordon, Henry, and so on. There was Edward's Day Out, Henry in the Tunnel, and then there was another story based on a story I'd read in the magazine about a Highland Railway banker being left behind. This was the story of how Gordon got stuck on the hill and had to be rescued by Edward, the engine whom he despised, banking him in the rear. But once Edward had started him off, Gordon was able to go on fast, and poor Edward ran out of steam and got left behind. And so there it was. And the first book, 3 Railway Engines, was published in 1945.
You know, we too, Audrey, we rather remind me of 2 of your engine characters talking. And, oh, for that matter, what about Bret Hart's thing? Let's wind up with him. You know, that was what the engines said, unreported and unread. Spoken slightly through the nose with a whistle at the close. Doesn't it?
Yes, certainly does.
Should be done in an American accent, though, which I didn't attempt.
D3577. Just come past. 77. Thank you. Another one over there, but I don't think I can spot it.
In about
3104.
184.
Is it? Oh yeah.
About 3 years ago I started collecting the numbers, simply then for something to do while I was watching the trains. But then I sort of got hooked on it, and well, when you get near to completing a class, well, you want to carry on and try and complete it.
Paid up to? Right, Audrey.
Well, this is the highly dodgy situation that I hoped we were not going to find ourselves in, that we are now in. We've had 2 rather poor pickups of water and only 1 good one out of 3. And it's really a question now as to whether to take the water that we have got laid on in reserve at Berwick-on-Tweed, or whether to take a calculated risk, I suppose is the term, and carry on beyond the point of no return and try and make Edinburgh. Now, this sort of decision is not mine. I'm not a professional railwayman. I'm merely an enthusiast. And obviously, my inclination would be to press on and have a go. But the people who carry the can, if anything does go wrong on this, are really the Chief Motive Fire Inspector and his number 1. That's to say, Les Richards and George Harland, and they're having a conference up on the engine at the moment. And that's why I've come back into the train, so that I don't in any way influence them. We shall know within a matter of minutes now whether we're going to do any more.
Inspector Richards and myself consider that with 3,000 gallons of water we have sufficient to take us to Edinburgh.
The point where we could have got some emergency water was there at Berwick-on-Tweed, and by being switched around the little goods loop, we were right alongside a road tanker that had 4,000 gallons of water in it. I don't know how much we've got on board, but my guess would be, with the mileage we've got to do, we've probably got about 2,500 to 3,000 gallons. I don't know.
You look
but
very,
that will be left when we get
I will go in a minute and find out, because I don't know.
You looked very cool when we nearly came to a stop outside Berwick.
Well, I think
must have been a very emotional moment.
It's absolutely fatal to do this sort of exercise as if one's going to do one's nut every time anything goes wrong, because I mean, one knows from experience, I have been lucky enough to be able to do this kind of run, not this drama, but this sort of run, many times over the last 5 years, and it's rather the exception if things do go completely without a hitch. They do sometimes go completely without a hitch, but usually there's a difficult decision somewhere or other to be taken about something or other.
You are aware, presumably, that there are 1,800 pints of beer on board?
Well, that would be a great help, of course, great comfort. we might be very glad of that. I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think she'd probably run very well on light ale.
Sad about
the steam going. Yes, there was something about a steam train that it had its own each engine had its own personality, you know, and you don't see that with the diesels.
We, sir, regard railways both in the museum, the historical sense and the modern sense. And while we regret the passing of the steam engine, nevertheless we consider that British Railways by 1970 will be the best in the world. The nation that forgets its past has no future. Let's leave it at that.
Why are you here today, madam?
To let my little boy see the Flying Scotsman. He's never seen a steam train. He's mad about trains.
Does he know it's the Flying Scotsman?
Yes, oh yes.
What's the train called?
I don't know.
Well, I think from time one as a little boy right on to manhood, a train and railway has always got a fascination. And I think today to know that after 40 years, we're still able to do this journey of nearly 400 miles non-stop, I think is still part of that fascination.
later for a drink.
Okay, yes, I'll come and do
Very delighted to have got here non-stop. That was the main object of the exercise, to do it without stopping, and although we had one or two very, very close calls, got down to walking speed once or twice, we did in fact achieve it without stopping at all. And I think we got here just about 30 minutes inside the old 1928 timing. Admittedly with a lighter load, but anyway, it's pretty good, I think, with an engine now 45 years old. When she did it 40 years ago, she was a youngster, and now she's not as young as she was. Done well over 2 million miles, and I think to have done that run after all those years is really quite an achievement.